The field of fleet management is undergoing significant changes due to rapid technological advancements. Traditional methods are being replaced by innovative solutions that improve operational efficiency, safety, and sustainability. From the integration of electric vehicles to the use of advanced telematics and predictive maintenance, fleets are now equipped with tools that support more streamlined fleet operations. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Analytics Insight podcast, where we talk about the ever evolving tech space. And I'm your host, Priya Dialani. The global push towards reducing carbon emissions has placed electric vehicles at the forefront of fleet innovation. Most of the focus is directed towards the electrification of vehicles, with little to no mention of shared mobility as part of the solution. And while EV transition is certainly key to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, it is important to notice that a single journey by bus pollutes 82% less than the same journey by car. Let's welcome Pali Tripathi, CEO of Taabi Mobility, to discuss how OBD powered intelligence is helping fleet operators reduce downtime, control costs, and improve reliability. Hi, Pali, how are you doing?
Hi, thank you, Priya. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Likewise, Pali, it's a pleasure to have you on our podcast today. And of course, when we are talking about fleet management, we all know how complex this entire industry is, considering the kind of efforts and work is required in terms of managing different types of fleets. And with the increasing carbon emissions, there are a lot of discussions and debates happening around the electrification or, what are different technologies we can use to make sure that we are achieving fleet efficiency but also achieving certain sustainability goals while we are scaling the business. But
Right.
let's start our conversation by learning more about Tabi Mobility, a very interesting name, I must say. So if you could brief us about the company, our listeners would be glad to understand about it.
Sure, sure. So let me first start with, usually when we talk about mobility or logistics or infrastructure in India, we often focus on scale, right? So more trucks, more roads, more equipment, more power. But often, if you see where all the what are we doing, what are we really, are we really nation building? Where it gets broken essentially is because of the real challenge that happens today, mobility at scale and not scale itself, right? So whether you are running a fleet of truck or you're managing construction equipments on a project site or you're even operating DG sets for power, the question remains the same, that how do you keep the assets running predictably, efficiently, and also safely. You mentioned emission sustainability, etc., right? So how do we keep the assets running but also running them reliably and predictably? And I think that's where Tabi comes in. The name Tabi comes from the Japanese word. It has Japanese lineage. It essentially means journey. And why Japanese? Because there is that correlation to very strong quality concepts which come from Japan, whether it is QBM, whether it is Kaizen. There is that everydayness to quality, and hence the name Tabi. So we are actually in the business of building trust on the road, whether it is any insight that we create, every kilometer we track, every decision that we are a part of. How do we make it safer? How do we make it smarter? And also, how do we make it more human? So, largely, that is the purpose that we are aiming towards and building towards. The very here and now of what we do is, in one sentence, is we are an AI led asset intelligence and operations intelligence platform. We have all kinds of assets, whether it is trucks or buses or EV vehicles or EG sets, right? So you name it, we kind of look at it, and these assets can be used by fleet operator, it can be used by a large enterprise, it can be captive, it can be from the market, etc. Our platform, it combines what you said, OBD, which is open board diagnostic solutions. It looks at predictive maintenance, it looks at safety and video intelligence, even things on the supply chain side, like transport management solutions. But increasingly, what differentiates us is that we are AI powered. So things like agentic AI, etc. It stitches everything together and offers the insights. So it's, in spite of all the challenges, dust, heat, overloading, idling, variable fuel quality. It's literally like that video game, Mario video game. So, like, you solve for something and there's a new one that comes in and you have to do it. Hence, what we have is something that's very flexible, that's real time, that's intelligent, that's agentic to solve these type of issues. So, a very long answer to who we are, Priya. That's who we are.
Great. Thank you for that overview, Pali. And that really helps set the context for our listeners of today's discussion. And I'm really glad to know is that how the company has positioned itself not just as a technology provider, but as a problem solver focused on delivering real business impact. And I think the way the company combines deep domain expertise with innovation and technology and the use of leveraging technology in the fleet management reflects a strong understanding of both market needs and future trends. Having said that, Pali, you have around close to 2 decades of professional experience and you bring deep expertise in strategy, business incubation, and scaling new age technological solutions. And you have a strong foundation across manufacturing, consulting, and consumer businesses. So, we would like to know more about you, Pali. How has your journey been till date, and what triggered your interest at Taabi Mobility?
Yeah, so yes, I think I am somebody who believes that any problem needs to be solved from a multidisciplinary perspective. I don't think any business issue can be solved with just a single lens, right? So it can't be just technology, or it can't just be let's put people behind the problem and throw people behind it, or let's just put processes around it. So what I've seen over the years, because I've been part of I started my career with Unilever. Then I was part of the whole consulting thing with EY, with Cruise, and then Seat in various functions, and leading various businesses, distribution-led businesses, strategy as a function, etc. What I have come to realize over the last 20 years or so is that fundamentals remain towards solving a problem. One is the solutions need to be very, very customer centric. So, how do we create something with the customer at the center and then create everything around the customer, right? So it's of course very cool to say that we are customer centric and we are, we're very heavy on customer experience, but is a whole organization taking every decision around the customer? And the definition of customer is also extremely important. Often, sometimes we think the customer is the one who pays, but there are a lot of customers that frankly exist for us. The truck driver is a customer. The maintenance supervisor is a customer. The fleet owner is a customer. A supply chain head is a customer. So you fundamentally keep this customer at the center of creating the solution. Then you create something that is worthwhile. And often, if you're able to solve for deeply, if you're able to solve for one single customer, there is a whole industry waiting to happen. Borrowing from Jeff Bezos, I think he said something around this in the early years of Amazon. The second bit is around what I said, that often we look at problems in silos. So we say that, product bana do, right? Create an app around this, or create a tire around this, or create a consumer good around it. But often and then you think that it is the job of the factory, or it is job of R&D, or it is the job of sales to sell it, etc. But I think some magic happens when one is able to combine all of these and just break down the walls going towards the problem. And the third is not really tying yourself to something that is permanent. I think the customer is evolving, technology is evolving, challenges are evolving. So, how do you fundamentally design for this sort of a change that you're anticipating, you are predicting, and hence you are there when the customer needs you? as opposed to taking a 2 year cycle or a 5 year cycle to respond to a challenge. So, largely, if I just look at the last couple of decades, these are some of the fundamental things that I've picked up towards approaching any problem. And that's where, I think Taabi was also born very organically from there. We were in the business of fleet tire solutions where we were selling tire as a service, one of the businesses within Seat, where we are selling cost per kilometer. We scaled this business very rapidly, one of the largest in the country right now in that space, where we were saying that we will bring such predictability in the tire usage and total cost of ownership that the brand becomes irrelevant in a way. So what you're really selling is that I'm assuring you kilometers per hour as opposed to telling you to blindly trust that, hey, take me because I am an ABC brand. So, and from there, what we learned was that predictability was an important thing to solve for a customer, especially a fleet operator who's using trucks. And but it was also important in any other case, a fleet of cabs, for example, exactly the same problem that I need predictability. So it's okay if the cost is high, but can you assure me that the cost is going to remain the same or that the cost is this versus all the hidden costs that will come in after? And from there, we evolved organically that not only tires, there were other costs that were hitting a customer. Fuel, for example, is a big one, almost 65% of the operating cost. Maintenance is a big one. Driver behavior related aspects are another part of it. And that's how Tabi was born. That how do we bring more predictability in an asset, in an operation through intelligence and through real time support, which is in the field, on the ground, wherever the work is happening.
Definitely. Thank you for that overview, Pali. And I think your journey highlights how leadership today isn't just about managing teams, but about creating alignment between technology, people, and business goals. And I think it gives our audience a great lens into what it really takes to build and sustain meaningful growth in a rapidly evolving tech landscape. Now, talking about fleet management, I think so. A lot of things actually have been taking place reactively in the long run,
Yes.
than when it comes
Yeah.
to maintenance or even the entire management. However, this strategy is often a costly gamble in the long run. And as industries become increasingly automated and equipments are becoming more sophisticated, the drawbacks of a reactive maintenance becomes more pronounced and financially impactful. And let's imagine a world where fleet vehicles don't just run until they break. Instead, they tell managers when fleet maintenance is required. So, this vision is fast becoming a reality today in fleet management, where predictive maintenance, which is powered by data and real time connectivity, is transforming how companies are handling their vehicles. So, what are certain limitations of the reactive maintenance models, and how do you think predictive maintenance is changing the way fleet operators are managing the entire fleet?
Yeah, that's a great question, Priya. So you're absolutely right. I think traditionally maintenance has been very reactive. Something breaks down, there's a driver who will report it, there'll be somebody who will check it, and then there will be a repair that will be done. But the problem with this approach, and this approach has been happening for a really long time, not only with transportation, but a lot of other sectors also, is that one, the failures happen at the worst possible time, right? Because you can't time the failure. So an asset can just break down middle of the route, a bus or a truck or a cab, right? If it's a construction equipment or a DG set or these concrete mixers, etc., that we have, for example, right? I mean, a machine can fail in the middle of the concrete being poured, which is very time sensitive. Take the example of a DG set, like it can just trip exactly when your grid power goes out. So the problem is that it will happen mostly Murphy's law. It will happen at the worst possible time. Second, there is a cascading effect to any asset downtime. So one failed asset, it will delay deliveries. It will delay manpower and material flow. So where is the person supposed to be deployed versus the next thing that is supposed to happen? Your customer commitments go for a toss, and sometimes there is even the regulatory or contractual hassle that one has to deal with. The third thing to any sort of a reactive approach to any, at least in the business that we are in, and it's also, I think, the most dangerous, is that the costs are invisible. So you will have emergency repairs, you will have fuel inefficiency, you will have premature wear and tear of a component or of a machine, and then of course the penalties and the reputational damages over and above that, right? So whether you look at fleets or you look at infrastructure projects run by large companies, or if you look at enterprises at scale, reactive maintenance becomes, it's not manageable. It's like a risk that you're dealing with all the time. That weak link, right? You may have planned for everything wonderfully, but if something like this happens, then you're at the mercy of, trying to solve for it, and our ever famous, ever notorious jugaad mentality then kind of, kicks in. Versus that, when you look at predictive maintenance, it just changes the question. So instead of asking ki what broke, it makes it more predictive. It becomes what is likely to break, when is it likely to break, right? So instead of a fixed service schedule or somebody's intuition, you're continuously monitoring certain things, whether it is engine health, whether it is load patterns, running hours, temperature, fault trends, from an OBD, you're able to understand fault codes, etc. Hence, the maintenance planning shifts. So it is planned instead of it being rushed. You are doing it basis actual usage as opposed to some template that was defined when you bought an asset. It is based on how are you actually using it. Like, for example, a truck, if it is operating in overload conditions on a bad road, the way the maintenance would be done, in fact, even the type and the brand of the asset could determine the way it is. And along with usage, the way you would maintain it would be very different from the same brand, but being run very differently. But most of the people, if you see, who are in this business, they would just be maintaining their assets in exactly the same cookie cutter way without looking at how is that asset actually being used. The third thing is you are actually having your maintenance scheduled around operations instead of disruptions. So you are doing it so that you are, in sync with whatever it is that you want to deliver down the road. So if I look at benefits for a fleet owner, it means there will be fewer breakdowns for construction equipment. It will be fewer stalled sites or projects. For DG sets, it means there is power continuity when it matters. But I think the biggest shift, is, of course, there is a commercial, financial rationale to it. But I think the biggest shift is psychological, because the assets have stopped being unpredictable, right? So they become measurable, they become forecastable, optimizable. So that brings around a fundamental shift in the way you're running the business, and it's a huge competitive advantage for anybody who's doing this. And we've seen the benefits across customer types.
Well, that's a really powerful way to look at it. And I think predictive maintenance is fundamentally shifting the mindset from reactive firefighting to a more proactive value creation. And I think what's emerging is a much more data-driven and confidence-led operating model where, where fleet management companies are not just maintaining vehicles, but they're also optimizing the performance, costs, and availability across the entire asset life cycle. And
Absolutely.
I think it's a really great example of how AI and analytics are transforming an industry which was a purely operational function into a strategic lever for scale and efficiency. Moving ahead, of course, when we're talking in the entire automotive landscape, technology is no longer an optional enhancement. I think it is becoming a backbone of vehicle design and functionality. And
Yes.
among the most transformative innovations is the onboard diagnostic systems, commonly known as OBD. So I think it is now becoming an essential component of any modern vehicle and playing a very key role in ensuring safety, efficiency, performance, and even sustainability. So, how would you define, OBD-based diagnostics in very simple terms? And why do you think they're becoming more and more foundational to modern fleet intelligence?
Yeah. So, see, all the new asset types, any modern engine of any asset, it knows its own health, right? Because that health information gets relayed to the R&D of the OEMs continuously, and it is used for other purposes. Globally, this data has been made available to the end customers and consumers. Some places there are regulatory parameters that say that you need to be able to access everything about your vehicle from this open board diagnostic, which is OBD. So what OBD does is, it very simply, it gives us the access to the information that so far the engine already knew about itself, right? It already, that information was being collected but not really shared with the customer. The OBD is that mechanism through which the information becomes accessible to the customer. So when you put an OBD device inside an asset, it is essentially accessing this information, and it is able to read the raw information. So it is able to get information like engine parameters, fault codes, temperature and pressure signals, even load and efficiency parameters. This data that is being collected on the back of the device, which is plugged in, it gets sent to the cloud, where the raw data is then made intelligent. It is interpreted. There are algorithms on top of it to make it into insights. So while you get the raw data, what you understand then is what is happening most often, why is it happening in certain conditions versus others, and you take a step further beyond insights. How do you action it? You build a control tower on top of it, you deploy an agent on top of it. You could have an agent taking calls that typically humans would do, right? So that's how there is an end to end system that works on the basis of this data that is available inside the asset. The best thing is that it's not something that works just for vehicles. It is something, look at a lot of types of assets. So trucks, excavators, cranes, DG sets. You can access this information from most of the modern ones, the latest ones, the BS6s, etc. You are able to access this information. In fact, BS4 and above, you're able to access this information. So, if I were to look at it, OBD is like a common, in a way, a common digital language for understanding an asset, whether it is mobile or it is stationary. So once that data layer exists, then you're able to build a lot of things on top of it, depending upon the problem you want to solve. So just to give you an example, if you knew that DG set, if it is giving these three type of fault codes, it is likely to trip, right? So the raw data will not tell you it is likely to trip. The algorithms that we build on top of it, which could be just a simple rule based logic, or it could be something more complex, would tell us that now it's about to. Hence, there's just an agent, pings somebody in the system to say this is something that is likely to happen. So, what makes it amazing is not the OBD itself. I think the technology has been around for a really long time, but just the way this intelligence is being accessed and the way it is being deployed across various use cases.
Definitely, and I think with what you said, I think OBD based diagnostics is not about just reading data from a vehicle, but when you look at it through a fleet lens, it becomes so much more than that. It turns vehicles into connected data points, which are constantly reporting on health, performance, and behavior in real time. So
Yes.
I think in so many ways, in different use cases, like you mentioned, I think OBD is no longer just a diagnostic tool. It's more like a data-driven point in a connected mobility ecosystem.
Yes, absolutely.
Very well said. Moving ahead, I think one of the a critical challenge, I wouldn't say challenge, but a critical discussion that is happening around these days is sustainability.
Yeah.
I think it has become imperative across all industries. And it's not just for the sake of protecting the environment. I think a sustainable operation is also a more efficient operation. But in a lot of fleet companies are still, relying on reactive maintenance and are trying to reduce the carbon footprint and energy consumption. But I think this approach have struggled to make progress. Fortunately, I think the industry is breaking out of the reactive run to fail rut. And as we discussed, predictive maintenance is becoming a game-changing strategy. So, how do you think predictive maintenance and the entire or the automotive industry or the fleet intelligence, if you call it, is impacting sustainability goals, especially in a country like India? And how do you think the future of logistics and mobility will be?
So, I think that's a great question, Priya. I'm so glad you asked. You know that often when you say sustainability in mobility, everybody starts talking about EV. You know, like it's just that, or BS6. You know, emission norms, and then you start reporting, and you're. I mean, what you don't understand is that why BS6? How does it really work? So, what it does, for example, is it reduces your nitrogen emission, for example, right? So it's also very important to understand that so while EV adoption will have its own challenges in the commercial sector, etc., the reality is that for now and for the near future, we all have diesel fueled vehicles, at least in the commercial space. So hence the need to look at other ways for sustainability, and I think predictive maintenance sits firmly there in an EV story as well as non-EV story, and more so in the latter. So, and in India, right, like logistics emissions are rising really fast, and I think that if you're able to maintain better, if you're able to use predictive maintenance, it is one of the fastest paths to greener mobility. The way it works is, it could help reduce fuel wastage from poorly maintained engines. It could lower emissions from inefficient vehicles. It could even extend vehicle and component life so that you are not, the same asset is lasting longer, and hence you're not putting more asset and putting more weight on the environment. And you're cutting unnecessary part replacements, etc. So there is a direct linkage to it. It seems very non-glamorous, but these everyday tweaks using technology, when you're able to maintain, an asset well, when you're able to know that, so for example, an enterprise that is deploying vehicles, let's look at some of the largest deployers, whether they're cement companies, whether they're FMCG companies. Right now, when they're deploying vehicles, are they really asking that, hey, I don't want vehicles who have, extraordinary emissions? At best, what they're asking is, give me BS6. But I think that story needs to go beyond that. Or if I'm contracting assets for project, I'm an infrastructure company and I'm deploying assets, and I have deployed really old assets with crazy emissions. Am I able to ask for that data? Am I able to look at that data and then not use those assets? Because it's not that all assets emit equally, right? There are some that there is an 80/20 that is there even in this. So I do think that this is a very, very important thing that gets ignored when we look at sustainability, and extremely important. And it is important for India's future as well, right? I mean, imagine like a world where you have assets that are self-reporting, self-warning, self-optimizing, and fleets are being maintained the way airlines are being maintained. Insurance companies are pricing risks based on live vehicle health, right? These are not future things. These are things that are happening here and now. OEMs, tire companies, even companies like us, right? Like we all are collaborating through shared data. So what that would mean is for India, there would be lower logistics costs. That cost per kilometer that often, depending upon which report you read, is supposed to be very high. So, that gets down. You have safer roads, you have cleaner transport, and you're being more competitive globally, when you look at a global scenario of trade. So it's extremely important. I think I can't talk enough about it.
Definitely. And I think the transformative potential of AI in fleet management operations aligns with India's national strategy for artificial intelligence as
Yes.
outlined by NITI Aayog. It
Yeah.
emphasizes leveraging AI to enhance operational efficiency, reduce costs, and support sustainability across sectors, including logistics and transportation. I
Yeah.
think such AI-driven fleet tracking systems directly address these goals by optimizing fleet operations in industries, like trucking, mining, and even transit.
Yes, absolutely. And AI, is also like you go a step ahead, for India. We've always skipped technologies, So I think AI could be one of the things for us also to be applied in traditional industries, where, you're not going through the whole route of, okay, first it is pen and paper. Now let's get it to a mobile and a laptop in terms of digitization. Then get it, on a process kind of a thing using any of these ERP platforms. And then you look at AI. I think AI has the potential to kind of digitize, at scale without the usual hoops that need to be gone through for this type of solution. And India specifically, because you have look at the kind of challenges you have. You have mixed asset ages, you have multiple OEMs, you have very high utilization. Cost is always a parameter. Like there's a huge cost sensitivity, and then there's always the skill gap that is happening on the ground. So if you look at like what we are looking at, which is agentic AI, it just becomes it's not just dashboard that you're then talking about. There's a clear recommendation and automation of actions. So you're pretty much depending on an agent to do the work instead of hoping that people on the ground are going to become digitally savvy and intelligent, and then kind of the change happens. So you're able to deploy agents. Just one example of how AI, for example, could become very pertinent in the logistics story in India, fleets as well as other parts of logistics and supply chain ecosystems.
Definitely, Pali. Thank you so much for your insights today, Pali, and helping us understand and highlighting how technologies, emerging technologies, fleet intelligence is undeniably transforming fleet management in India. And by addressing long-standing challenges, it empowers operators to achieve operational excellence, enhance safety, and even respond to fleet accidents and be updated with the latest trends. And companies like Taabi Mobility are at the forefront of this transformation, offering innovative solutions that simplify complex systems. Thank you so much for your time and effort, Apali, and sharing some interesting insights. It was lovely chatting with you.
Thank you, Priya. Likewise, it was a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you. So, this is for our listeners. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion around fleet management, certain challenges that we are facing, and how emerging technologies and data-driven systems are helping fleet companies and operators to address these challenges and evolve into something that can help them scale their businesses sustainably. Stay tuned for upcoming podcast, and you can view all our previous podcasts on Spotify and other leading platforms. Thank you so much.